All right, we'll go ahead and hit it. We'll go. Let it load here for a second. Get everybody in. We are live. UGA football live. Round 3. Arthur Lynch joining me. Best tight end in college football history. Y'all didn't know. He's got great swag. Always comes in. Look at him. Nike sponsored AirPods. I love it. How you doing?
The GOAT for sure. The GOAT for sure. I'm good, man. I'm good. I mean, we were talking a little bit offline, but these Saturday is like the one we just witnessed. Just from a pure college football fandom perspective, you can't beat it, man. For week 2, that was awesome.
No, exactly.
That was awesome.
I love the lineup, and let's get into our Georgia takeaways real quick first, and we'll hit some college football stuff because it was a great week. Like we talked about, a great week of ball. Really, week 2 was. So initial takeaways, I guess I'll throw it to myself here. Georgia came out, obviously, I think sluggish in the first quarter again. And just statistically, I think Georgia has 7 points, 132 yards off the top of my dome here that I wrote earlier today, and 0 opponent turnovers in the first quarter. Quarters second through the fourth through 2 games, 800 something yards, 89 points, I think it was, 4 turnovers by the Georgia defense. I think that's really telling, FCS opponents, but it did happen again here. Ball State is a MAC, but lower opponents here, and Georgia still starts off sluggish. I don't know what that is. Obviously, you can mention the injury at starters for multiple positions. That might be an issue there for Georgia down the road if they can't get them back. I don't know. It could be just vanilla offenses. You don't know. I think Georgia was really trying to prove that they could run the ball in this game. Didn't really work out that way. I love what we saw from Dylan Bell at running back. I think the injuries, and Kirby Smart mentioned this after the game, the injuries at running back, it really prompted them to play Dylan Bell, who had been practicing there at times during the fall when Georgia had more of those injuries, when Kendall Milton was down and not practicing, Dejon as well. Now they've both been practicing a little bit, but still with the injuries there, Dylan Bell comes in, and he looked like the most explosive running back that we've seen in 2 games, which is the craziest thing. And, he's 6 foot, 200 pounds. But I remember last year just thinking, watching him as a freshman, that he was breaking so many tackles. He was so good after the catch as a freshman. And Georgia was more loaded at receiver. You had the A.D. Mitchell there, and Lad McConkey was going off, and he was healthy. And Dylan Bell moves over there to running back and gets that, it was like 24-yard score with a great cut outside. We haven't seen a lot of those cuts. It's more, I think, from a running back position with Roderick Robinson and Kendall Milton, limited snaps for Kendall for sure through the first 2 games. Also Andrew Paul, and I think these guys are more of a downhill runner. They're gonna hit the hole hard, and they're gonna run through tackles maybe for a couple of yards. They get up the outside, they're looking to run somebody over. But Dylan Bell was like, no, I'm not gonna get touched. I love seeing that. Will we see that more? I think they're gonna get him involved in a lot, because they even get Brock Bowers a rush. They're going to give Dylan Bell, I think, some more touches in that backfield like that this year, and I'd love to see it. So interested to see what happens with Dylan Bell at running back this week. Defensively, the defensive backs were just flying all over the field. I mean, you look at Ball State; they were trying to get the ball out soon, and Georgia was still making them pay in the back end for that. The defensive line, I think, played better in this game, statistically wise as well. Warren Brinson was in the backfield all day. Mikael Williams, they were moving him from defensive end over to interior defensive line to get him one-on-one with offensive guards. I like to see that. That's very interesting. I think he's a true freshman All-American. He's so talented. Do other things with him, I think he is the best Georgia defensive lineman. Use him in different ways. Get him one-on-one, because people are going to try to key on him. Love to see that. We saw Ismail Mondon get a lot more snaps this week. He was questionable with that foot injury. He only played a few snaps in week 1. So overall, I like what I saw. I think we played much better. I think we opened up the playbook at times a little bit more to get Carson Beck and this team ready for SEC play. So I'm really excited for SEC play, and to see what Bobo does with this offense. Artie, I'll throw it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Takeaways for Ball State, your first thoughts, maybe offense, defense.
Yeah, I mean, I would somewhat disagree with, we started sluggish. Obviously, I think we had like 21 points in the first half or first quarter. I mean, but I think,
First half.
yeah, from my understanding, right? I'm not in the locker room. I haven't played in a long time, but it's just incredibly difficult. There are so many guys on this team that have played in big time games for the past 2-3 years that I'm not saying that they like. I think Kirby does a really good job of staying present and keeping his guys locked in for the task at hand and not looking ahead. But I think, all things considered, I think they played, a very much complete game. I think they came out, it was a little sluggish, but they weren't in a dogfight in the first half, right? I mean, it was clear early on that this was going to be a blowout. I think they looked much better collectively, both in all three phases of the game. I think they looked better than they did in the first game, right? And what did we talk about last week, right? We want to see improvement from week 1 to week 2, particularly at the quarterback position, particularly at the other positions that may not have the depth or the experience as, say, the offensive line or the defensive unit, right? The receivers, the running backs, and obviously the guy under center. And I think we saw improvement in those three offensive groups, right? In those skill position groups. And I think that's very important. I again, not worried. I am intrigued by this week, right? And we could talk more about this game later, but as you know, as we all know, and anyone listening or watching the show right now, SEC play is SEC play, right? I don't care who the opponent is. I don't care how many 5 stars we have and how many few 5 stars or 4 stars they have. Like, SEC teams have NFL talent. Vanderbilt, understandably, does not have as much of talent, but the other 15 teams, you pick a team, there's NFL talent on that team. And I think this will be a good test for Georgia. We're playing away. But I think if you're just looking holistically, 2 games in, you have to be excited about the week 1 to week 2 improvement, because ultimately you want to get incrementally better as the season goes on. And I think the coaching staff is doing a good job of, what does Kirby always say? Keep the main thing the main thing. And I think the main thing at Georgia is compete and do what you can to do your job at a high level and get better at your craft every single day. And I think right now the team's getting better in perfecting their craft every single day.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm very much still in the relax mindset.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there's definitely things to key off. That's why I do mention some things I'd like to see improvements on, and some areas that I noticed that we were lacking a bit. Pass blocking, receiver, I think it's one thing. But again, you don't have Lad McConkey in there. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint first came back from a suspension. So I think you get those young guys involved and more in a blocking mindset at times, and they're just learning. They're getting real game reps against people they haven't gone up against in practice. So, this is going to be, I think, a great game for these starters, that they're going to be in there for longer. Now, depending on what the score is, maybe late in the third quarter, fourth, maybe they'll sit. But, it's not going to be like those first 2 games, I don't think. I don't think there's going to be much rotation on the defense. Defensive line and linebacker, there always has been, so expect that. But at DB, safety, I know Javon Bullard probably going to miss this game, which is a big hit. But I think you have your front 7, the rest of your defense. Those guys are going to be ready to play. I don't think that's going to hurt us. But it is going to give an opportunity for other guys to shine, prove themselves. Can they play really well and show they can be a rotational player more? But I think it is exciting for these starters to really get to play more in this game.
Yeah, totally agree.
As far as let's jump into running backs 2 more here, because I wrote a story on what Noshawn Marino said when he joined the Players Lounge this week. Very interesting to me. I totally agree with what he said. I don't know if you saw it, but basically, in other words, he said, these running backs in this room right now should be angry. They should be angry that a receiver came in and took their reps. and not only took the reps, played well, and he
Mhm.
did something differently than we've seen and score a long touchdown as a running back and make a great cut, make a guy miss. There hasn't been a lot of that. So O'Shawn was like, it should light a fire under this running back room. So that might even be a benefit other than just on the field. It might be a benefit for that running back room and seeing a receiver come in and take your snaps. You don't want to give up snaps, right? I mean, that's not a thing
Yeah.
that these guys do. They play at a high level, at the highest level of college football. That's not what they're about. They want to go and prove themselves for a shot at the NFL, right? I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. I'm interested on your thoughts on it too.
Yeah. I think first off, you have to know, you have to understand. To understand the quote, you have to understand the man. And now I didn't play with Knowshon in college, but I played with Knowshon with Miami Dolphins my rookie year. I got to know Knowshon very well. He became a close friend and someone I looked up to and trusted. He tore his ACL and I broke my L405 vertebrae. My rookie year, and obviously he was 6th or 7th year free agent signing for the Dolphins. So I got to know him really well. That guy is one of the most passionate dudes I know, particularly when they strap on the helmet, right? Like he tore his ACL in the Chargers game. He had a career game for us, tore his ACL like fourth quarter, went in and was like pass block and like, getting after it with a torn ACL, right? In the NFL. Like this dude he is balls to the wall competing at a high level and like is ready to go to the mats for his teammates, right? So when we're all the guys, like I'm washed up, Knowshon's washed, we're all washed. But if Knowshon Moreno, who is an all-time great Georgia back, I think he's kind of like an icon, legend, personally, in terms of like Georgia history. He's calling them out, and I know they probably say, "Oh, who's this old guy?" Or whatever. Like, for Knowshon to say that, he's taking it personal, right? Because he takes pride in being a Georgia running back. I know that for a fact because my rookie year, he and I were talking about it. He was like, "What's Gurley like? What's Marshall like?" Like, because I like watching them play because they play with a passion. Like they represent what it means to be a running back at the University of Georgia. And we don't have to go through the whole long list. We can dedicate a whole 3-episode series on the Georgia running back history and the guys that have come through. But Knowshon's saying that because he's like, the fact that a receiver's coming in there and meeting the expectations and meeting the moment, and he's not even technically in your running back room, like that should really light a fire under the rear ends of those guys. And to be clear, right? I think it's very clear about the type of program that Kirby runs and the type of program that his coaching staff really tries to or culture they really try to create. And that's, hey, the best players will play, and the guys that are willing to compete on a day in, day out basis and do the little things right are going to play. And if Bell's the guy that's going to come up and be the starting running back and the premier home run guy, yeah, it's going to look weird because I think it's 87, right? And he's toting that thing for the backfield. Yeah, it might look a little weird. They might have to go give him like number 23 or something. But man, yeah, I saw the clip of that. I didn't watch the whole interview, but I watched the clip. I think it was rolling around on Twitter or something. And Knowshon, you could just tell, like, the tears not coming down his face during the anthem like he did when he played the Broncos, but you can sense the fire in him, and it's personal for him. And to be honest, it should be personal for those guys who are not getting the reps.
Yeah, no, I think the passion is evident, especially writing that story, listening to him talk with Aaron for like 30 minutes. Definitely passionate, and he's on every week for an offensive breakdown with Aaron and Ben Jones, Travaris King,
TK, right?
Yeah. So check it out there, guys. And I also do a write up on that if you want to check it out. You don't have time to watch a video, but that's one of those things that was interesting to me is the running back situation. But you move on from that. Really excited to see SEC play, and we're going to get to that in just a second. Let's talk college football weekend really quick. Right, we'll get into the history class with Arthur Lynch ahead of this South Carolina matchup. Let's just start with the creme de la creme, Alabama, Texas. What a game, man! The environment that's the first real college football game we've seen this year in 2 weeks, and week 0 you counted 3. the environment, the hype, and then play on the field, because it went back and forth, low scoring game. Felt like one of those, mid 2000s, like early 2010 SEC games, field goals, defensive battle. And then it went touchdown, 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 touchdown in the second half right there. And the fourth, I believe it was. And, you had Jermaine Burton running open for Alabama. A.D. Mitchell was all over the field. I love seeing that for A.D., but I also hated it because of what he did for Georgia, knowing the talent that left. And I fully expected him to do that for Texas this year. Just hearing from him all year, well, really 2 years at Georgia. I think it's interesting to look at the Alabama team for sure, because they were so limited in their play calling, it felt like with Milroe. And it didn't feel like they were. I watched a little bit of it again just to kind of confirm what I was thinking. But Tommy Rees, the OC, it didn't feel like he called the game for Milroe and really got the most out of him, which was surprising to me. It was more like deep shot. Deep shot's not there. Nothing's there. And then we're going to run the ball up the middle and get a yard and a half. I didn't really feel like they moved the pocket or created plays for him to be able to use his legs. And that's what he's so dynamic. He still made plays. But I think they could have called that game a little better. And credit the Texas defense. I think they obviously played really well in stopping them in the fourth right there. And the offense holding the ball for like 7 minutes, it was, I think. That long drive really kept Alabama from getting the ball. So a great game. I think Texas, they beat Alabama on the road in Bryant-Denny, right? So that has to be considered. Can they do it for a full season? Well, they're still, I think, a younger team. Can they do it against somebody on the road later in the season who you're supposed to beat? I think that's something we haven't seen from them. But as far as playing in a big situation and playing well, and Quinn Ewers, the thing that stood out for me for Quinn is his release is an NFL release. That is a quick release. His arm angle, he's not over the top. Quick release. I don't know what the timing was. I know they timed the NFL guys. I bet we could look it up. But his release looked so quick to me. Alabama really didn't have a chance almost to rush him. And they weren't blitzing him at the end either. They knew they weren't going to get there. They were like, I'm going to drop in coverage and just hope we can block a lane for you. Because I feel like Quinn Ewers' release is so fast that it's very hard to really put pressure on him. So that was really impressed by that too, and his poise and decision-making. What were your thoughts on the Tide going down, Nick Saban walking out of Bryant-Denny with a loss?
Yeah, I think look, we can break down the game, all that stuff. A.D. Mitchell, yeah, it's all great. But I think ultimately, like, what I like to do is look at the bigger picture, right? Like, and at one point during the game, it looked like the roles of the two programs were reversed, right? For so long, for so many years, we saw Alabama terrorize quarterbacks, get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sacks a game, right? Not from the beginning of their dynasty, but really in the past, let's call it like 5 to 6 years, Alabama's ability to really spread the ball around the field, have 2 or 3 receivers that can really stretch a defense. That wasn't the case, right? That was more Texas this time around. And when I kind of look at Alabama holistically, right, and I have a couple of guys that I know that I'm close friends with that I played with, Zach Mettenberger, Joe Cox, that are on the staff there. And I think I think both of those guys are going to be kind of, fast risers in the college coaching world. But if you look at the structure of Saban's staff, and I was listening to a couple analysts this past week, podcasts, and reading a few things about like what's going on in Alabama. Right. And if you look at Georgia's success, yeah, Kirby's an unbelievable recruiter, right? He's been able to build this thing from the ground up and just make us into a powerhouse. But if you look at the continuity and his staff, right, over the course past 3 or 4 years, right? Monken was around for a couple of years. Muschamp's been now, on staff for a couple of years. But he's been able to collectively build staffs and have them around for a couple of years. And I think one thing that Saban has been lacking is there's just no continuity in the staffs, right? And there's so much turnover, and you can kind of see it because it seems that like Tommy Rees was like a plug and play guy. And I know Tommy a little bit he was the Notre Dame quarterback when I was in college.
Yeah,
I
he
got
got
to
rolled
meet
by
Coach.
Alabama in the national
Yep,
championship.
yes, sir, he did. And I, uh, I got to know some of his teammates when I was training at IMG in the draft, and I think he's a really good coach. But it just seemed like that was like a kind of last minute plug and play, right? From a hiring perspective, and they were. I just think that if you look back when they had some more continuity within their staffs at Alabama, particularly at the coordinator positions, whether it be McElwain, whether it to roll to Kiffin, to roll to Sarkisian, like they would tailor the offense around their personnel, right? Remember when they had Sims, who like is a Georgia kid, and then got moved to like running
Waited his
back,
turn. Yeah, I think he
H
was a
back.
senior when he was
Was
starting.
it is it Blake Sims was his first name? I think.
I don't know if it was Blake, but it was definitely Sims, number 6.
And but like they went from like I think it was AJ McCarron to Sims, and then next thing you know, like AJ McCarron threw like I think he was like 28 touchdowns, 3 picks, and then but they always tailored the offense around the skill set of the guy under center. And to your point, Milroe, I think if I were the OC, and obviously I'm not, and I'm not going to be, but I'm just sitting here in my armchair OC or quarterbacking. But I would just be like, go look up Lamar Jackson tapes or like old West Virginia, Pat White, Steve Slayton. Like, how can we get the ball into our playmakers' hands where they're comfortable? And to me, they were just Quinn Ewers is probably going to be a top 5 pick. Milroe is not going to be a top 5 pure passer pick, and you can't go shot for shot with like Steph Curry, a 3-point shooter. You know what I mean? It's just not going to end well. So I'm with you. I think they looked a little. They lacked an identity, and it certainly wasn't for lack of talent. I think it was for lack of just a core identity on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, it's like when you're up against an offense like that, you need to have an offense to counter that with, and I don't think they did.
No, I agree. Several other matchups here. Interesting to me. I mean, a lot of ranked teams really struggle too. I mean, you look at Tennessee. We'll stick in the SEC and a former or a future Georgia opponent. They struggled. They did struggle with Austin Peay. And I doing some work for them with the Players Lounge and kind of read into that a little bit and did some overview of that game. It's interesting to look at because that was the tougher opponent they played. And Virginia, I feel like Austin Peay might even beat Virginia. But Austin Peay in that Tennessee pass defense, they were able to expose them a little bit. And that's what we saw all last year when Georgia tore them up, is that pass defense. Now, they had some starters back this year who were bitten by injury last year. They're all seniors in that secondary. Red shirt, seniors, a couple of them. They've been in there for a long time. They don't have a lot of game experience, though. And I think obviously time to grow here, but that was interesting to me to see because you also have, Joe Milton, who's one of the strongest arms in college football. And that's great to have him in that up-tempo attack. But if you have a defense, we've seen that Tennessee offense and that system just be beat with better teams with a good offense and a better defense. That's where Tennessee finds its match. So that's something to look at, I think, as Tennessee goes. And they have a matchup with Florida in Gainesville for a Florida team that has absolutely nothing to lose. I mean, nothing to lose in this game. Utah loss. This is going to make their season if they upset Tennessee.
I think he's coaching for his job. I think,
I
think it's safe to say now, even though it's year 2, Billy Napier is coaching for his job, as is Jimbo Fisher. We can get to Jimbo in a sec. I think Tennessee, I saw them play in person in Heupel's first year. Obviously watched the game last year on TV I still think they lack serious depth, particularly at the defensive side of the ball. And, we don't, this isn't a Tennessee podcast, so we don't have to go like litigate their
future opponent.
Yeah. Their past 10 years of the coaching carousel nonsense and the guy that was there before Heupel. But I think they lacked a serious ability to like develop talent. I think they were okay at recruiting, obviously, but they just even last year, I was like, yeah, they're good and they got some players, but I just think that if they lose a guy here or there, it's kind of a house of cards type deal.
Yeah.
And if you look at Georgia, you look at Alabama, and even I can't really say Texas yet, but look at Georgia, Alabama, even LSU. Like LSU last year, the year before last, like lost. I think they played that bowl game in Ed Orgeron's last year, and like they had like 48 scholarship guys or something ridiculous. But the guys that they had left were still dudes. You know what I mean? And like, it's depth is the biggest issue anytime you're trying to build a sustainable like contender in the SEC. And I think Tennessee still probably lacks depth. I think they're probably ones across the board are solid. Maybe some cracks in the armor and the defense side of the ball, but I still think they lack a little bit of depth, which is where like, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the LSUs typically are like, okay, yeah, like our guy's down, but we've developed the guy in this next man up mentality that he's going to be more than all right. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's kind of my view on Tennessee right now.
Yeah, watch that defense, y'all. I know we're playing them in the future. I mean, you got to keep up your SEC opponents here. Tennessee is one, of course, to watch. And Joe Milton has a strong arm. The receiver core is not as good as last year. Running back room, actually good. Running back room is good. Their offensive line can push people off the ball, at least against lesser opponents. We'll see against Florida this week. But that defense, I keep an eye on that defense. We'll move into just a couple more. I'm going to get into history class with Arthur Lynch here in a second. Auburn struggled with Cal, got away with a 14-10 win. I know Hugh Freeze is just trying to get that built up. We'll see what they can morph into. Wisconsin went down to Washington State. Wisconsin was number 19. And then Oregon covered the 8-point spread on a pick 6. I like that. Bo Nick's on the road though, so if he's not on the road, they're going to score 80 or something like that. And then North Carolina went and beat Appalachian State by 6 in 2 overtimes. That was a great game. And we'll just for sake of time, we'll move on. One's Ole Miss. Ole Miss, I know they beat a backup quarterback from Tulane. Somebody to watch. I mentioned on this show in the past in the offseason, watch out for Ole Miss. Everybody's skipping over Ole Miss in this Georgia schedule, I'll mention. But something to look out for. And also, last thing, Utah, 20-13 at Baylor, though. But I don't think they're as good as we thought they were. But they need their starting quarterback back. I think that'll be a different team. Somebody to watch.
That one killed me, Coach. I was pulling for Baylor because my boy Chris Robinson is the coach over there. And they jumped up to an early lead, and I was like, upset. Here we go. And then, that one stung for my boy, but it is what it is.
They play well.
What it is.
Defensive battle. All right. Let's get into history class with Artie Lynch. He'll be doing this every week for you guys because we love college football. We love the history, and that is part of college football is the history. So, Artie, take it away. What you got for us this week?
Yeah, so obviously, I kind of went on a spiel last week. Huge college football fan. I mean, I was like a college football almanac. I was like, it's like walking, talking encyclopedia as like a 8, 9, 10-year-old, right? But I'm going to keep it in the theme for Georgia. Last week, we talked about the 2013 Georgia, South Carolina game. And then this is going to also on this day in history, September 14th, we're going to keep it the same South Carolina opponent who are also playing Saturday. But this is an ode to the Georgia great, Georgia legend, 3-time All-American, media darling, David Pollock. And it was today, 21 years ago, 2002, David Pollock had his signature that kind of sack the quarterback, palm the ball, come up on it with the pick. And I got a AP article, and they asked Coach Rick, Coach, what do you think of this game? And Coach Rick goes, one of my first observations is that David Pollock is a warrior. And, again, did not grow up a Georgia fan, but there are a few kind of like burning images that I have from like CBS, highlights over the years, right? When you're watching the game, whatever the game it is, and they would always play that David Pollock, like chasing down the quarterback end zone. It almost looked like a wrestling move where he just like grabbed it, comes over, picks the ball off, and I was doing the whole Google, looking up Wikipedia about old schedules, Georgia, September 14th, what year, and sure enough, 2002 pops up. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's the clip that I saw earlier the week circulating on the internet from David Pollock. So kept it Georgia again this week. It just ironically came, South Carolina week, 2 weeks in a row for our little this day in history. But as we kind of go through the season, I'm going to throw in a couple different curveballs, talk about a different moments in history that I think will be relevant to anybody that's a college football fan. But shout out to David Pollock, a history major at University of Georgia, like your boy, and yeah, I think he's landing on his feet from a media perspective, but what a guy, what a representative, what a kind of a spokesperson for the university, man. I think David's an awesome guy.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, so he joined the Players Lounge last week and the defensive breakdown, which we just mentioned earlier. Guys, check it out on TPL at the Players Lounge. He joined Aaron, a couple other guys, can't remember. I think it was Brandon Boykin, somebody else. And then he jumped in, they talked about the defensive takeaways from week one. And it was interesting. David said that was the worst Georgia defensive line play that he's seen in a couple of years. Something to consider of the teams that we had the last 2 years and defenses that you had and the guys on those teams.
Yeah.
But, he ended it with, they're going to get improved. But just something to think about. But I also, hearing him speak during that, I was like, he is going to be on TV somewhere. He has to be. And me and my girl were talking about the other day watching College Game Day. We were like, it's missing something. Pat McAfee's in there now. I love Pat McAfee's energy. I think he's hilarious, but he doesn't have the football analytic mindset and or takes, or it's really informative additions into the talk that David had. And I do miss that a lot from College Game Day, but I'll still watch it anyway. It's for the vibes. It's for the energy. Okay.
Yeah, I think David, and again, this is going to be an all-inclusive college football podcast, I think, or show. I think if you look at the media landscape of what's happening over the course of the next 10 years, in I think it's really a 7-year deal. I think David, even though he's an SEC guy, I think CBS and Fox and NBC are going to make a play for him, and they obviously signed a massive deal with the Big Ten, and he has such a strong brand, and he's so good on TV that I think he'd be a really cool. I think his personality fits the Big Ten almost better than it does the SEC, just because the way he played defensive line and the defensive linemen that are just kind of like mean psychopaths that have come through, the Ohio States, the Penn States, and the Michigans, and I just think that fits his personality, and I think he'll provide some awesome insight. And I have no idea. I do not know David Pollock. David does not know me, but I just think that the amount of coverage that the Big Ten is going to get with that 7-year, $7 billion 3-network deal that they just signed, I think David hopefully will find a place over there, because I think it's a big time loss on ESPN, and he's going to land on his feet, and whoever gets him is getting a stud.
Oh, for sure. Change the music. That's all I want. I mean, I'll watch it. Change the freaking music. If you're CBS, I don't want to hear SEC's music. Okay. History class with Artie Lynch. That was great, man. We appreciate it. Let's get into South Carolina for real now. Let's talk about some stats and players to watch here. So things to know for South Carolina when you watch this game. Covered this game this week, did some research, of course, for that, and a couple of points I want to touch on. So first, Spencer Rattler is much improved. All right, so when Georgia faced Spencer last year, that was his third game in that uniform, obviously transferred from Oklahoma, a lot of hype. He was still getting comfortable, threw for 118 yards, 2 interceptions, 13 to 25, I believe it was. Obviously horrible, right? Look at the Georgia defense. I mean, you know what he's facing. They were like one of the only teams to really do that to him last year. Look at the end of the season, played upset at the end of the season. It was the Gamecocks did. It was largely because of Spencer Rattler. And this year, he's even taken a further step from an efficiency standpoint through the first 2 games, and that's against North Carolina and Furman. Obviously lost to North Carolina, was a shootout for a bit. North Carolina pulled away. Furman, they killed him 47-17, something like that. He is second in the SEC in passing yards at 698. He's first in the SEC in completions percentage, which is 83%. And that should tell you a couple things. One, it tells you he's getting the ball out fast. Two, I think it tells you that the offense and the offensive line, I think the Gamecocks know what they have there, and they know they have to get it out fast. And they know they have to be more of a dink and dunk and get it out before the sticks and not taking as many shots. Their offensive line might be one of the worst in the SEC, at least of how they've played to this point. Still early in the season, we know. But they're not playing us later in the season. They're playing us Saturday. So they've given up 9 sacks, all to North Carolina in that first game. Furman did give one, North Carolina 9 sacks. They're ranked 129th out of 133 FBS teams in sacks allowed. Look at the run game. You know, you want to look at both ways. Maybe they're a good running team. Maybe pass protection is lacking. Not the case right now. Averaging 53 yards rushing. So they are very one-dimensional. Now, they do use their running back out of the backfield in Joyner, and he is one of those dual threat backs now. The running game hasn't been there for them, and, of course, that translates to Joyner. But as a receiver, he is good. He can give you that dual threat. He's a do-it-all back. I think that's really where that team starts because they lost some guys. They do have some weapons on offense we'll get into now. Defense, averaging – let me make sure I'm telling you this right. I think it's 32 points a game they're giving up. That's not 32, 28, something like that. Sorry, boys and girls. Don't have it in front of me. Remembered all the other ones, though. And something to look out for, I think, is that defense. They're going to want to pressure and show some new things to Carson Beck because they know this is going to be his third start. And I think that's really the only way they can take advantage. I'm not sure what they're going to do on offense. I think it's a lot of that dink and dunk. They're going to try to keep doing that with Spencer Rattler. He's been efficient, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. We'll see what he does this week against Georgia. Let's get into players to watch here. Here's my 5 key. We just talked about Rattler. He's one of them. At receiver, this dude's a dog. I mean, Xavier Legette, or Legette, however you pronounce it. 296 receiving yards through 2 games. Big part of that passing attack. It already surpassed his 167 yards all of last year, and he has 3 less receptions than he did all of last year. So he is that guy. He is that target for Rattler right now, and he's 6'3", 227. He's like Alshon Jeffrey we talked about last week. He's a matchup problem. So can they get him one-on-one with these Georgia defensive backs who have not been tested against big guys? That's one thing we have not played yet this year is bigger receivers who can challenge you like that. And Arthur, as a route runner, you can talk on this all day. I'm sure I'd love to get your input, but the threat that poses on the outside for a guy like that who's physically going to overmatch your defensive backs. We don't have anybody that big, right? Our linebackers maybe outside linebackers, but we don't have any guys like that. How do you go about game planning for a guy like that on the outside?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? I think when you think about receivers, what makes receivers special, right? And Tyreek Hill, he's got the burners, right? Like you blink, he's past you. But if you look at some of like the best receivers of the past like 10, 15 years, they've got great length. And what do I mean by that, right? I'm not saying they're like 6'6" Megatron Calvin Johnson, but you're looking at like anywhere from like 6'1" to 6'3", and their catch radius is huge, right? Long arms, ability to go up and get the ball. And, I think Georgia has, in the past couple of years, have had some DBs who also had some great length. And that's very helpful when you're going up against a receiver who's big like that. But you got to be physical with them. You got to be physical at the point of attack, and you've got to be able to track the ball in the air, because no matter how much length that you have as a defensive back, right, you ain't going to be 6'3", 230, right? I think the only DB, I think there's 2 DBs who have been like 6'1" plus that I know. That was Dre Kirkpatrick, who was a former first-round pick for Alabama, played 10 years in the league, Cincinnati Bengals guy. He was about 6'3". He was my year class. And Patrick Peterson is about 6'1". But typically, your prototypical DB is thin, decent length, but like thick 5'11", 6 foot. Like, you're not talking about a big guy, right? Physical, sure, no doubt. Extremely athletic, 100%. Like tier 1 athlete.
Yeah.
But when you got a guy like this, you got to match his physicality, and you got to be able to track the ball, and you got to put pressure on the quarterback. And I know that is not up to the DBs. That's up to the front seven.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about it about what David Pollock was saying. You got to give your DBs a chance, because if you give the quarterback all the time in the world, the 6'3" dude who can run, he's going to be able to make plays. So you got to get the quarterback.
And if you're just joining the stream, we were talking about Xavier Legette for South Carolina, 6'3", 227. He's their main pass catcher. We're talking about the impact he could have. Brandon Boykin was also on that call with David Pollock as well. He was talking about how the defensive line, helps your defensive backs. Of course, we know that, they can sack the quarterback, present weird angles for that quarterback to throw at and mess up the route run and his throwing ability. I think something to think about here is the safety play for Georgia is so good right now, even without Javon Bullard out. Even without Javon Bullard out, Dan Jackson and Daniel Sissavan playing really well right now. Tyke Smith at Star is playing like an All-American, like he was at West Virginia. So I think that safety play, that's why I'm not as concerned. And at least the corners that we have are physical. Yeah, they might be thin or smaller, that they are physical. So just something to know, not something to be worried about per se. But if he goes up for a jump ball, if they get in the red zone, look out for my man Xavier. And we already talked about the Dakereon Joyner, running back, do-it-all guys, 23 times for 65 yards. We know South Carolina's run game is atrocious right now. But, every team improves from week to week, especially early in the season. He's got 9 catches for 66 yards. So that's where they like to use him. That's where his best average is. Watch him come out of the backfield, maybe a challenge for our linebackers in coverage. And then as far as defensive, not a lot there for South Carolina. You haven't seen a guy really take off and be that number one, in my opinion. I like Jalen Kilgrove. He's a Georgia native from Eatonton. Leads them in tackles, 18 stops on the year, had 12 tackles versus North Carolina. Former 4-star guy. And at linebacker, Debo Williams. Most productive player in that front seven. Junior, 18 tackles this season, 14 in the season opener in North Carolina. I think this sets up for really a domination game for Georgia on the offensive side of the ball. I think Bobo opens up the playbook. I think you have to. I know we have UAB next week, but then you go to Auburn and the Fighting Hugh Freezes. And just like with Florida, I know obviously Hugh Freeze is not, well, he could be fighting for his job anyway, because it's Auburn, right? They have such high expectations anyway.
No, there is no telling when it comes to Auburn.
Yeah. What a dumpster fire most of the time. The Fighting Hugh Freezes, we got to go face them in a couple weeks, right? And interesting to think of them because it's at Auburn and they have so much to gain from even making it a close game, right? So I think we'll get into what we want to see now. We've kind of ran through things and we're looking good on time. So let's talk about what we want to see. And I would love to see Bobo open up the playbook. I would love to see Carson Beck, who looked, by the way, so much more comfortable. I know that first drive was not great. Ended with a fumble that he recovered, ball in the wrong hand as a runner. I'm sure he got chewed up in the film room for that, which he should, but, young guy as far as game snaps goes. Peyton Woodring missed that kick. I feel like I jinxed Peyton Woodring last week. I was talking about the kicker. You remember what I was talking about? I was like, we got a freshman kicker. He's starting. I jinxed him a week out. I mean, that's on me, guys. That's on me, guys. I take the loss for that one. Just let me know your Venmos and I'll send 3 points to you. But I think that's what I love to see. Bobo open up the playbook. Carson Beck looks so much more comfortable last week. Does he keep that streak going? I think Georgia might get a couple guys back. It looks like Dejon Edwards is going to play. From an injury standpoint, Ladd McConkey doesn't seem like he's going to play. Been not available, Kirby Smart said on Tuesday. And usually when you cannot practice on this Kirby Smart squad, you do not play. That's what we've learned in the past. Defensively, Javon Bullard, we've already mentioned. I think if you get Dejon Edwards back, get him in the pass game a little bit. Let's see what happens there. I like Brock Bowers in this game to really match up on these South Carolina defenders in the back end. I don't think they can run with them. Not many people can run with Brock Bowers, but I think Georgia opens it up enough in the run game. Excited to see the run game. I think the run game makes its statement in this week because all they've heard the last 2 weeks is how bad they're playing. But they're not even really playing that bad. It's just it's not at the level. They're ranked 9th in the SEC in running right now. They were 4th. They finished 4th last year. A couple of new pieces on the offensive line, running backs, injuries. I like to see that get a little better this week. I think it does. And that defense for South Carolina is going to have so much trouble, I think, with what Bobo and Carson Beck, Dejon Edwards, and Brock Bowers are able to do in this game. And that offensive line gets more cohesion about it, a little bit of confidence maybe in the first, second quarter, and then it goes off and really runs it up the throat. I think that's what happens. I think that defense for Georgia, the defensive backs, maybe they play a little bit more in the game. Maybe they're excited about that, like we talked about earlier. So I like Georgia a lot this week. It's at home. It's 3:30. What a beautiful game. It's on CBS. We get to hear the music for one of the last times on an SEC game. I'm going to be pumped for that. I'll be in Athens, so I guess I won't get to hear it per se. But love the CBS 3:30 kickoff. All right.
Smash.
Kirby Smart has already challenged the fan base, right? Because they had this South Carolina offensive guard. You might have seen this already this week. In SEC media days, he said that Georgia wasn't. Well, he didn't necessarily. Georgia wasn't an intimidating atmosphere. He just mentioned Texas A&M and I think Neyland Stadium as the two places toughest for him. So Kirby Smart, of course, dropped his name in the conference. That was on purpose. That is so on purpose, right? Like what?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So he challenged the fans with that. So I expect really
Kirby knows how to. Kirby knows how to. He's got like that Michael Jordan like psychosis thing going on. Like he'll find a way to be like not jaded, but like slighted, even if there's like, which is that's how he motivates his guys. But
yeah. And they respond obviously.
100%. Trust me. I think he knows how to control emotions and poke the bears on his team that need to be poked, proverbial bears, obviously. And I think he just knows how to get guys going. And obviously they were upset when they were number 1 in the country by South Carolina back in 2019, I believe was the game. I'm sure he's bringing that up. I have to be completely honest. I actually had like South Carolina as a potential dark horse to be like an 8, 9, 10 win team this year. Because I think Beamer can recruit. I think he has been recruiting. I think he's a motivator or was a motivator. But I got to be honest. I hear a lot of complaining from him. And they haven't been playing very inspired football. Like I thought they were going to beat North Carolina, to be honest.
Me too. I took them.
And that was embarrassing in so many different ways. And so I think they're about to get just manhandled on Saturday. Personally, I think Georgia, it's a test for sure. I'm glad it's home, to be honest, because William Bryce is a wild card. That is, you want to talk about a tough place to play. Yeah. It's when they go sandstorm, it's a wild place. When we played there in 2012, we got our rear ends handed to us. Me and Aaron, they were playing sandstorm. I think College Game Day was there. Top 5 matchup.
Don't bring that up.
I'm sitting on the bench. Me and Murray are like, we get ready. We're getting the ball. They kick it off. They're doing sandstorm, and I'm like, I look at Murray, and I'm like, we better come back. We better come out firing because this is the loudest stadium I have ever been in. Shaking. The bench that we were sitting on was shaking. We don't have to go into the details of that game, but it did not go as planned.
That absolutely.
But I'm just so, and I'm bringing that up. It doesn't even matter. We're playing at home, but I like us this week. I think Spencer Rattler is going to be very, very sore at the end of the day. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for Carson Beck to like play. My guess is we'll play a full game no matter what the score is, unless it's like a really, really, really bad blowout. You know what I mean? But I think, it's going to be a really good opportunity to see an SEC defense, real SEC players, and it's going to be a different speed. I don't care, how good this team is or good or bad this team is. SEC players are not the first 2 weeks that they just faced, right? And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for the entire football team at UGA to come together. 3:30, CBS, the music that we love will be humming. And as a former player, anyone will tell you, anybody, that the CBS 3:30 slot is the best slot in college football, right? The night games, the 12 games, there's pros and cons to all of them. But there is no better feeling in the world than when you and your boys go out at 3:30, national televised game, SEC rival, home game, Sanford Stadium, between the hedges, the sea of red, you go and win the game, and then you can go, you come after the game, you get the food, you go back to your home, hang with your family, can relax, can do that kind of post-game tailgate and not feel rushed and chaotic, because it's you can watch college football. It's not midnight after. There's just so many different factors that go into being a college football player, a student in Athens. Yeah. And look, I just know how those guys appreciate and love those 3:30 slots, because I know we did, and they're going to be up for this game. And I think they're going to wipe the floor of South Carolina. And obviously we can't overlook UAB, but Auburn is definitely a game that scares me more than South Carolina this year, because it's out there. And I think Hugh Freeze he's a good coach. He's got tricks up his sleeve, and we'll worry about them in a couple of weeks. But I like Georgia. I like Georgia big this week.
All right, let me give you a prediction. Tell me if we cover 27.5, and then give me a score.
I normally don't like those spreads covered because it's just so many points, but I don't think South Carolina is good this year. I don't. And 3 weeks ago, I would have said, no, it's going to be a dogfight. I think Georgia wins by 31. I think it's a 42, 44 to 3 game, right? Maybe 44-10. But they still cover.
Yeah. Quick note about the 3:30. I heard Javon Bullard and Jackson Meeks. They also do a show at the Players Lounge. Check us out, guys. They said as well, they echoed your point there. 3:30 games. They were like, man, that 3:30 game's different. So
different, man.
This man knows what he's talking about, folks. Artie Lynch.
Different. That's that's a timeless thing. You know what I mean? I'm sure you talk to Stinchcomb and them, and they're gonna say that 3:30 slot. And it's not to go downtown and be written. It's just you get there's so many few opportunities you get to suit it up between the hedges, right? And I know for me, especially my grandfather coached football for 35 years, played college football. My family would come down, and to be able to go and just chill after a 3:30 game in the house with the Murrays, the Robinsons, the Frickses, it's food's there. It's just and then, the parents go all right, kids, we're going back to the hotel. And then we're all right, now we're going to be college kids at night. You know what I mean? It's just It's such a cool atmosphere. And I'm biased. You're biased. There's no better place to go to college than University of Georgia. But that 3:30 slot, it's different.
It's going to be rocking, guys. We're really excited for it. Hope you are as well. For me, I think Georgia, I'm not going to get into what I said because I just said what I think is going to happen. But I will say Spencer Rattler gets picked off at least once because that Georgia pass rush gets to him a couple of times. Georgia, they cover 27.5. I like as 48-10. I'm going to give them 10 because I like the over of 54.
Okay.
All right, boys and girls. All right. And one thing I'll leave you guys with, a couple of picks for you to look out for. Mississippi State is plus 9.5 over LSU.
Oh, I'm
like
taking Mississippi State.
I like Mississippi State. Me and Artie both like Mississippi State. Will Rogers, Arnett, great defense. Not great defense. Good defense. They're going to cover 9.5. Tennessee minus 6.5 over Florida. I think Tennessee makes a statement here. Florida's just abysmal. I don't think they do enough here. They don't have enough. I think Tennessee pulls away at the end. They cover 6.5. It's just a touchdown. Arkansas, -7.5 over BYU. Arkansas is playing good. They can run the ball. They're leading the SEC in running. BYU does not have the dudes up front to beat a Sam Pittman-led, KJ Jefferson-led Arkansas offense and offensive front. Not going to happen. 7.5. And then already my Georgia picks have been noted. We appreciate it so much, guys, for you listening and watching. We'll, of course, have this episode up on our YouTube as well going into the weekend. So I'll be pushing this tomorrow and leading up to game day. So if you want to jump in and watch it, we appreciate it. Subscribe to Pulse Sports Network. I'm also going to load this up into the UGA Football Live podcast on audio platforms. So please rate us there and give us a follow. As always, Arthur Lynch has been great, man. Can't wait to do it again next week. College football's here.
Love this, man. Yeah, I love this. Love talking college ball. Hey, enjoy these Saturdays because they come and go quick. But a lot of matchups this weekend to be excited about, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yes, sir. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Yes, sir.